Welcome to This Indulgent Life with me, Mary Cook, and this is episode number 24. We are finally catching up on some interviews, and I'm so excited to get back on track. Today on This Indulgent Life, we are speaking with Brian of the Brian Zhou Show on what it was like to be raised as a first-generation American and pave his own path to the American dream. Welcome to another episode of This Indulgent Life, where I give you tools, strategies, and encouragement to help you parent with confidence. I'm Mary, and after having my own personal revelation on what it meant to break the cycles of anger and guilt, to connect deeply and live joyfully in both my parenting and personal life, I began helping other mamas do the same. If you want to be inspired, if you want to be a more mindful parent, if you want to know what it takes to take that next step in creating your extraordinary life, then you are in the right place. Welcome back. I am so excited to finally get these podcast episodes out. As you know, it's been a long time coming. This particular episode I filmed before I left Hong Kong, so it's been quite a while. And I finally found somebody to help me kind of get me back on track and editing these and helping me put them all together. And I'm so thankful to her. And so I'm really excited for this next chapter of This Indulgent Life. If you don't know, we started out this podcast as kind of like family travel and adventures. But as I went through and as I was helping other mamas online and talking with them, I realized that while travel is completely my thing, I love it. It's not my bigger purpose. I meet a lot more mamas. I get to travel to new places because of it, but my true calling, my true purpose is to help other moms kind of find their own path and to teach them the tools and the strategies to parent in a nonviolent way, to reparent themselves, and just really connect, right? And that includes family travel, so sometimes we'll still have that. But I really want to give everyone the information that I had to search for, that I had to learn on my own for so long until I finally found some community. And I want to be that community for you. So 2 things. 1, make sure you subscribe. And if you really enjoy these episodes, I'd love if you could leave a rating and review in iTunes or wherever you listen. And then don't forget, I do have a free Facebook group. Now, previously it was called something else, but I have changed it because it's no longer just about family travel, and it's super easy. It's just facebook.com/groups/This Indulgent Life. So you can easily find it. I'll change all the links. It'll be perfectly easy to get to. And inside that group, I have a free 5-day challenge where you get all of the tips and tools and mindset changes that you need to be a calmer, more joyful you. It will not be available forever. I already have a plan to eventually take it down because I gave a lot of information in there. Most people have said I should charge for it, and I eventually will. But right now, I really just want to get you started on the right path. And so for a limited time, it is available free in my Facebook group. So if you're listening to this a year from now, it won't be in there. I'm sorry, but we will have other trainings. I have weekly lives, weekly threads giving you some tips on how to have more adventures with your family, because it's still a major pillar in my parenting beliefs. There's lives with other people, and these podcasts that I do with other people will actually be in the group first, live. So if you're in the group, you get to hear it before everyone else. So come join us there. Just search This Indulgent Life and you should find it. Now let's move on with the show. Welcome back. I'm so excited to introduce Brian to you. Brian is a first-generation Asian American that had strict, like really strict, Asian parents. He felt forced to go to school to be a white-collar worker, but along the way, he decided it wasn't for him. So he decided to change his life trajectory, which was a little scary when you're so used to living one path. He decided to live for himself by traveling to New Zealand and discovering his passion for photos and video. Now he has his own media company and a podcast called Brian Zhou Media and The Brian Zhou Show, respectively. And he has big plans. He has big plans to help teens discover their true passions, discover how to live as an adult, and he has amazing ideas. So I'm really excited to introduce Brian to you. He's not the typical person that I would have on the podcast. He's not a parent. He's not married, but he has this experience as a first-generation American. He has experience living almost like a third culture kid. Not completely, but still a lot of similarities. And I think it would really help you to understand what that life is like and what it means to kind of break free and find your own path, which is what I'm all about, is finding your path. So welcome and enjoy the show. All right, so welcome Brian Zhou from the Brian Zhou Show. I'm so excited to have you on here. I love getting to talk with kids who travel, or kids who grew up in different cultures, because it gives my listeners, the parents, an idea of what to expect when they go and live in different cultures or travel with their kids. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I just want to kind of know your origin story. So just a little bit about who you are and how you got into this, travel life, expat life.
Okay, yeah. So at the moment, I'm not currently in the travel expat life, but I guess I'll start at the beginning. So growing up, I had traditionally Asian parents, and though everyone knows the story, like they're always pushing you towards the white collar job, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, and so I was just trying to make them happy, and I was just trying to be a good son. So I followed what they wanted me to do, and at one point I just realized that I wasn't happy. I spent a lot of time in school. I really appreciate them spending time and money, like paying for my school. Like college, they thank the Lord, I guess, but they were able to pay for a university and college. So, but they did it, and I did what they wanted to do. So I think it kind of like evens out in that way. So, yeah, and then so I was going into PA school, and if you don't know what that is, it's a physician's assistant school, and so I was going to be like a lower class of doctor, I guess, and
just barely be able to say it.
Yeah. You're like kind of a doctor, but not really. And so I honestly, if I had followed that career, I probably would have been pretty successful as well. But I was doing my prerequisites for PA school, and I was working in a nursing home. And at first, it's really satisfying. You're helping people. And at a certain point, I just realized I wanted more out of life, like wiping butts and feeding people that can't feed themselves. Like that's really like you feel like you're doing something important at first. And then after a month or two, I just like felt like I was being useless, and I felt like I could do a lot more. Like, don't get me wrong, there's people that really feel satisfied in doing those like direct care kind of things. And when I realized that I just didn't get the satisfaction out of it, I was like, I need to change something in my life. And so after that, I decided to, I had just broken up with my girlfriend at the time. So I was like, freedom, I can do whatever I want now. And so I ended up booking a one-way ticket to New Zealand when I was a little bit tipsy one night. A lot of my life decisions have sometimes been made like the big ones at least, were made a little tipsy. And I can go back earlier and talk about my family and like the trips that we did earlier, but I kind of want to just share this main story
Yeah.
of how I found it. So, anyways, I booked it 3 months in advance from this site called Skip Lagged, and they show you on this like little timeline of like what the price is. It'll be like going
Yeah.
up and down, up and down. And so I picked the cheapest ticket, which was about 3 months out, and I just saved up and left. And so the reason why I went on this journey to New Zealand was a little bit like I just need freedom. And then once I got there, I realized that it was for so much more. I realized that it was for understanding who I was, searching for who I am, and cutting off all ties to my parents to help myself realize that I could be an independent adult by myself with no financial connections, with no emotional connections. So I was completely on my own, completely away from them. So cutting all those pillars, like cutting all those ties, and like kind of like taking those I guess like strong hold pillars that they kind of help hold me up with. I was really able to jump into who I am. And so that is kind of like the beginning of the journey of how I found it. And, I traveled around, saw a lot of cool stuff. But when you first get into expat life when you're a kid, I was in my early 20s. So a lot of drinking and a lot of partying. That's usually what a lot of younger expats do just because, I don't know, you're free from your parents. So
Well,
you feel like you
especially
need
in
to.
New Zealand, right? Like in New Zealand and Australia, that seems to be the thing. I remember those. I didn't personally very much, but I remember. Yeah, you could definitely not drink those people under the table.
Yeah, no, they're pretty nutty out there for sure. So really really nice people out that way though.
Hmm.
A lot of people have very negative views towards Americans. That's something that I realized. So sometimes it was actually easier to say that I was Canadian. It was just a really carefree kind of life. I obviously I had to live because I only had about 4 or 5 grand when I got over there, but essentially what I was doing was just kind of like letting everything go. And that was really big part for me, was just letting go of everything that was holding me back and really trying to establish who I am. And honestly, it was all about having fun, meeting people, learning about different cultures and stuff. Because uh, if you don't know about New Zealand much, it's, first of all, it's probably the most beautiful place in the world. I don't know how, like, compared to other places, because I have a lot of other places I want to go to, but it's definitely up there. And that's one of the main reasons that I decided to go, was because actually there was a blogger. Her name is Young Adventuress, and I just saw her posting pictures. She's actually an American that traveled to New Zealand, and she's an expat that lives there. So she inspired me to kind of like take that leap of faith as well. Um, but yeah, after a long, I had bought a camera to go to New Zealand to kind of just like take really awesome pictures. Because if you go to New Zealand and you take pictures and they suck, you are literally the worst photographer in the world, just because like everything's beautiful. As long as you just put it on a screen, it's like it's gonna look good. It's really hard to mess it up. So I started with landscape photography, and then I just kind of like went from there. But ultimately, for the experience in New Zealand, was just meeting all sorts of different people from all over the world. There's a lot of culture there. I met Argentinians, I met Germans, Swedes, I met like all the Canadians, like everyone. I met everyone all over the world. It was unbelievable, and it really, honestly, it kind of reminded me of like a smaller America in a sense. Maybe a bit more liberal, but in a good way. And it was just a melting pot of people, and everyone was really inviting for the most part. So it was a really great experience.
I actually really want to deep dive into that, but I think before we can do that, we kind of need to understand maybe a little bit more about your mentality at the time and how you grew up, because you grew up basically living between two cultures, and
Yes.
because you're first generation American, and your parents are from China, mainland China. And that, of course, at that time especially came with a lot of background and a lot of culture.
Yeah.
And can you just, for everyone to understand your need for freedom, because I mean, a lot of parents are hoping that if they travel with their kids, it's going to make them more bonded. And typically that does. So help us understand a little bit more about your mentality at that time and growing up between these cultures.
So you're talking about just like how I interacted with my parents specifically, kind of thing, and how like the travels that we did take influenced that kind of thing.
That and about what it was like to live in one place with one kind of culture, but then go home and be expected to adhere to a different culture.
Okay.
And how
Yeah.
that really kind of gave you the need to travel and discover yourself.
Okay. So I think I don't think all parents are like my parents. So I think the stereotypical Chinese parents is it's definitely a stereotype, and there's plenty of Chinese parents that don't fall under this umbrella.
Yeah.
It's a huge stereotypical generalization, but in my case, it was true. So I guess when I was younger, I mean, I'm trying to think of how to say this, but pretty much they were just very aggressive with my studies, right? They were just like, you have to get A's. That's the only thing that matters in the world, and nothing else matters pretty much. And so that was huge for me. And I actually learned Chinese before I learned English. So the differences in culture, I don't think I really started realizing until I got a little bit older.
Mm.
When I was younger, I was just like, okay, this is my life. But then noticing that communication with my parents became really difficult. Because once I started going to like, I don't remember this, but this is what I imagine just understanding my past because I have a terrible memory. But um,
I
uh,
understand.
yeah. And so I noticed that I started having trouble communicating with my parents, and it was more than just like teenage angst or anything like that. It was like I really don't get them, and because they grew up in oppressive China, right, where it was like the Industrial Revolution was just around the corner kind of thing, or it was like I don't know, the Industrial Revolution happened a little later in China than
Yeah,
it did in the U.S.
a lot
So
later.
yeah, and so I think it was just happening at the time, and like I forgot who was the president. I think it was Mao Zedong or something like that.
Mm.
But it was so the government in general was just oppressive. That's the main point.
Yes.
And so they came over to America to escape that, and their story is actually pretty crazy, but that would be a little bit longer. So, but they like escaped the country. So with my brother, who was born in China, so he actually has a lot of Chinese tendencies, even though he came at around 5, I think. But when they came over, right, their mentality was stuck in that age, so 50s, 60s, oppressive China. And so when they came here, that's all they remembered. And something that I noticed is that I don't even know if they've adapted yet to American culture and how American culture works. Because if you've grown up most of your life, 20, 30 years in one place, you go to another place, unless you're actively trying to adapt, you're not going to adapt.
Yeah.
And I don't think they have. I still think to this day that their mentality is kind of stuck in that. My parents are kind of a little bit hoardy.
Well, it's that scarcity mindset, right? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
you
Yep.
you talk about your parents, but to be completely honest, and I feel like they have way more reasoning to be this way than my own. But
Totally.
that's how I
Totally.
grew up as well. Is this idea of you have to be better than I was because you need to succeed where I did not. You need to have the
Yep.
opportunities that I didn't have. I mean, I didn't even know until I was 14 that I had the choice of not going to college. So
Yeah.
it's a scarcity mindset. It's a mindset that a lot of poor communities kind of grow up with, or at least lower middle class, and it it's just about fear and wanting to give you more than they had. It comes from a place of love, but it comes also from fear, which makes it, of course, more oppressive.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that the fear was a really big part of how they raised me. And like, don't get me wrong. I know my parents love me. I
Yeah,
love my
totally.
parents. And I'm definitely learning to respect them more, even though we have huge differences. It's been a struggle for sure my entire life. Um, and, I think to segue into traveling, I took a lot of trips with my parents when I was younger. And you know what? Honestly, I think our family was happier then because I remember going on trips to China with my family and just being able to explore with them, hang out with them, experience like different cultures with them. I definitely felt more attachment to them and connection with them when that happened. And even yeah, and a couple of years later, we stopped going. We stopped taking trips. I remember in middle school, I think it was the last time that we decided to go on a trip, and we were going to Florida. Not anywhere crazy, but we were going to Florida. We're driving. I live in Michigan, so if you know where that is, it's the mitten state. So we look like a mitten. But if you drive down south, we were in Ohio at the time, and at a gas station in Lima, Ohio, like middle of nowhere, I those like salt bags that they have at gas
Yes.
stations? Yep. So they were about like waist high for me when I was a kid, and I just thought I'd be cool and I'd just jump over it. And when I jumped over it, I actually landed wrong on my ankle, and then
No.
that canceled the entire Florida trip because I was like, no, it's fine, it's fine. And then it like I heard something pop, but I was like, no, like let's go on this vacation. It's gonna be great. And they were like, we went to the emergency room because I was like, I literally can't stand on this foot anymore. And so, yeah, I broke my ankle, and that was the last attempt at traveling that we did. So, after that, we never traveled again. And it was, I definitely, I mean, there's more to the story of like
Obviously.
why
Yeah.
our family like had distance between them. Like my father worked in a different state because he felt money like to me this is my perspective, so I'm not saying like what he did was wrong, but from my perspective it seemed like he moved to a different state to work to get the family money, which I understand, but he could have had similar jobs near us that were a little less pay. And my brother was in college at the time, or maybe even just graduated college, and he said, "Dad, Brian's in a really, you know, like fragile state in his development because he probably took some like psych class or development class or something." Anyways, my brother's a smart guy, smart butt or whatever, but he said that. So and my dad still decided to live in New York, so he would be New Jersey, so he lived really far apart, and I think there was a lot of distancing as well. So I think that travel would have helped and kept the family closer together. But that's something that we didn't prioritize in our lives, and yeah, just like family time wasn't what was important. What was important was money, probably because of that scarcity
Yep.
mindset that we were talking about. So yeah, I don't know. It's funny because when I do podcasts, like I interview other people and they go really deep into their story. So it's like really interesting to be the person that's being interviewed right now. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna have that in a little bit as well. It's it's hard being vulnerable for sure.
yeah,
And I think your story is good because I think a lot of people listening kind of dream of traveling with their families, but they're like, well, no, I've gotta work. I mean, even my mother, right? Like she's like, well, you just have to have a job. You have to have a job. Like you can't just like do your own thing. You have to have a job. Like you like like the
yeah,
this concept for our parents' generation in general is just you doesn't matter if you're absolutely miserable. You just have to make the money. And to some extent, yes, you do need to provide for yourself and your family and whatnot. And you do need to think ahead. But there's got to be some middle ground. There's got to be a balance in there. And spending your whole life miserable just to earn $1 is no life at all. And I think it's really helpful for parents to see what happens and the way the kids actually feel from somebody who's grown up through that. I actually don't even think, I mean, obviously, your parents' upbringing and the experiences they've had are hugely to play in that mindset, but it's a cross-cultural phenomenon, right? Like it's a mindset that a lot of people who grow up with any kind of trauma or scarcity have to deal with. And it's only if you can work through that that you can move forward in your own family. So I think it's helpful for you to share that with us. And I understand that it's a little vulnerable, but I do think that parents will get something from that.
Yeah, I have no problem with being vulnerable for sure. I love sharing my story because I know that it can help people. And I wouldn't do it unless I knew that it would do something, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I appreciate what you're doing with the podcast as well. So
just want to give parents the inspiration and the knowledge that they need to be able to take these next steps with their family.
Yeah.
Now that you are an adult, though, like, and you can obviously understand these things better, is there anything that you're really grateful to your parents for now that you're an adult that maybe was really difficult as a kid?
Oh, man. Yes, obviously. There was something that you were talking about earlier that I kind of want to touch on before I jump into this.
Okay.
So we were talking about how our parents grew up a certain way with the scarcity mindset, right? You have to just work to get a job and you have to make that money regardless, right? And I think actually our society might be going the opposite direction where it's like total freedom. You're like trying to be too free. I think finding balance is the most important thing, like for you. So self-awareness and understanding what you personally need. Some people just love working and they love working like job A, you know, and then maybe they're not making as much as like they might like, but they're happy. And like, that's amazing. That's super. If you know that that's okay for you and that's supporting your family and that's giving you the life that you want, that's great. And then obviously there's other people on the opposite end of the spectrum that's like, I need more, I need more, I need more. Right. And then you have to establish like, okay, is traveling beneficial for me, or is like, what can I do to facilitate the life that I want? So I guess it's not even just based around traveling, but just in general, realizing that like, I know what I need. First, you have to find out who you are, obviously, right? And you have to be like, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to do to find that said, like, whatever it is, I guess. And, all right. Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of want to say that really quick. So
no, it's true because, you know, and like I say in the spiel at the beginning, there is no like one size fits all. The American dream isn't the same for everyone. And it's up to you to figure out what that looks like for you and your family. I just happen to firmly believe that some kind of intentional experiences together, whether it's full-time or weekends together, is imperative to the family experience.
Totally. And I think traveling is important, just to experience more cultures, more exposure to everything. But I would say even just having like really setting time aside and making sure that the family spends time together. That's what our family didn't do. And now we're trying to recover from decades of like no connection. And like we are working hard, or at least I know I am. I'm working very hard to try to connect. But I think that if our family had taken more initiative throughout the years, to even if it was like once a month or just like once every 2 weeks,
right?
Just on a weekend, you know, just everyone get together, do something like anything, board games or go see a movie. Because those small things may not seem like an important thing at the time, but as a child, I can look back and say that that would have been a lot more beneficial in me connecting with my parents because they chose, in my eyes, they chose to work instead of be there for me. So that's why I'm so frustrated with the situation between my parents. But like I said, I love them. I'm trying to like accept that they chose the direction that they chose. I don't think I'll ever understand them, but at least I can give them forgiveness for what I feel like has been done to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And just accepting that that's what they thought was going to be best for you. And like they thought that they were giving you what you needed in order for you to succeed in life where they maybe struggled to do so that you could have a better life in the future. Which, trust me, I'm right there with you, is not easy to accept.
Yeah. I mean, so I would even go as far as to say, like, I don't think that my parents were necessarily aware of how things would affect me. Because I just know I don't want to like talk about their intelligence or anything like that. But I think there were things that were more important to my parents. I don't want to say who, but I think that there was things that are more important to my parents than like thinking about me. And money and security was probably at the forefront of everything, even though they were making hundreds and thousands of dollars or whatever, because my dad was in pharmacy, my mom was a nurse practitioner. Money wasn't an issue, but yet they still chose to chase after it. So I think it was just the awareness wasn't there for what I needed. And that's why I'm so angry and frustrated. And that's why I'm trying to be like forgiveful for them. So, I mean, my advice for any parent is just take the time, like spend time with your kids. Cause you don't want your kid to be mid-20s, like 30s and look back on their life and just be like, I never saw you. And I think that that's like a huge part of it. So
I actually think we should maybe just keep going in this direction. I think it's way more important than maybe the stories that you could talk to us about, you know, visiting China and whatnot. This idea that it doesn't have to be big, and it's super imperative that you spend time with your kids and that you make the time intentional and you focus on them. I mean, your parents didn't even have, well, you are a little bit younger than me, but I don't think they even had like the smartphones and things to distract them the way that we do now. So they only really had, you know, the jobs and daily life. Yep. Now we have those, plus we have all the technology. And I love technology. I mean, I got my own smartphone. I, you know, enjoy putzing on Facebook. Yeah. I'm definitely not guilt-free here. But it's a matter of really being intentional and at least spending some quality, focused time with your kids. And I think listening to your kids, because it feels also that you weren't really heard. And it feels like you kind of want parents to understand that, you know, you need to hear your kids and hear what they need and respond to that. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that's true. And like I said, they were more focused on their work, which I understand, like the reasoning behind it, because I've talked to them about it a little bit before, and they said, you know, well, we just were thinking that what happens if we just died? And I was like, and they were like, you know, we want to have some money set aside for you. And I was like, I get that. I mean, okay, so don't get me wrong. I just wanted to clarify that everything that my parents did to make me who I am today, I'm very grateful. So regardless of how I feel emotionally, the strength that I have as a person independently of them, I don't think would have been nearly as strong had I not gone through that. So I think there's something to be said about not necessarily being raised by your parents, because honestly, I look back, they gave me food, they gave me shelter, they gave me like the basic needs that I needed. But essentially, emotionally, I consider I raised myself as a teenager. Earlier on, obviously, as a baby, I needed more attention. But once I started doing stuff on my own, I would say that I spent most of my teenage years raising myself, because Or no, actually, video games raised me. So whenever my parents were gone, I would either do my homework, or once I was finished with my homework, I would just go play video games. And my mom would come home and she'd be angry and be like, "Why are you playing video games all the time?" And I'm like, "It's because it's what I like to do." But now that I look back on it, I was like, I didn't have anything else. But like I said, I wouldn't have my own business now. I wouldn't have my own podcast. I wouldn't have traveled probably as much. And I probably would have stayed doing what they wanted me to do for longer if they had been more a part of my life, because I think I would have had more loyalty to their beliefs. So I mean, there's something to be said with I believe that everything works out the way it's supposed to, and I think I would have broke off and found what I wanted to do eventually. But I think that I found it earlier than I would have had they been supportive my entire life. So I just feel stronger, if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm stronger than I would have been if they had coddled me my whole life. So, I mean, okay.
A balance in everything. A balance in everything.
And I do have an interesting thought on electronics and how social media and phones and technology affects children nowadays. And I feel like this affects my generation as well, because we were the ones that kind of started growing up into it. Teenage years is when cell phones start to come about, and that's when the boom of technology started happening. So I think I have a unique perspective on this. Is that unique in like millions and billions of other children, whatever. I get it. I don't know. I said that and I was like, that doesn't make sense. Okay. But I feel like parents need to be more aware of what's going on now than ever. So in the past, kids will figure out what to do to have fun. But since there's so much immediate gratification now through technology, kids don't get bored. And boredom breeds creativity, and boredom breeds amazing thoughts. So kids don't think anymore. So it's important to make sure that your kids get bored, like really bored, to the point where they're just like, I'm going to go insane. And then you let them go a little bit insane, and then they start creating some really amazing things. No, seriously.
Seriously, no, I'm fully with you.
Yeah, it's crazy how people think it's like boredom is such a terrible thing, but like boredom is where the real magic actually happens. And
it's a skill. It's a skill. You need to learn how to be bored. Or at least we do. We need to relearn.
Yeah. And so I would say that impatience in our generation, in my wait, how old are you?
34.
34. So I would say that we're in like a relatively similar generation still, because I'm 27. So I feel like our generation, and especially the next generation, which is going to be worse than us, impatience, right? So think about all the things that we have. We have immediate everything. Everything is immediate. You want to order something from Amazon? Bam, got it. Next day, Amazon Prime that thing, or like Netflix. Oh, you want to watch a movie? Sure, why not? Or you want to illegally stream something? Sure, why not? Anything that you want, you can get immediately. So there's no way to passively teach our children patience. Well, in the past, patience was just something that you learned because you couldn't get everything as fast as now. So realizing that children will not passively learn patience in today's day and age and into the future, I think it's really important more than ever that parents are active in teaching their kids these essential skills like manners. That's a huge thing that needs to be taught again, like really aggressively. Patience. Really need to be teaching that aggressively to your kids. Just being aware of the things that are necessary for a good, kind-hearted, well-rounded human being, and emphasizing those even more now, because a lot of passive parenting has been happening in today's age, I think, more than ever, with technology as well. Hey, I don't want to deal with my kid right now. Here, play this game. Passive parenting. I'm not saying that it's everyone. I definitely think that it's more frequent in our society now than it used to be. And I think that's something that I really wanted to say is you need to make sure that you're realizing that you need to put more work in than you probably used to have to with technology being here.
Yeah, I didn't actually think about that. I mean, it's inherent and whatnot. And I think a lot of it also comes down to it's not that the technology is bad and that you should just chuck it all away.
No,
But
technology is great.
the problem becomes when you're solely relying on it, and or when you think the methods of the past. I didn't really think about this whole idea of passive, learning of manners and things like that. And I guess it is true. A lot of things that manners, and I mean, well, manners a lot of times I feel we're actually sometimes too aggressive about, because it doesn't come naturally then, and you just learn how to say it. You don't really learn how to be it. I think a lot of both of those, though, manners and patience, comes back to the parent. Are you as a parent exhibiting the manners and patience that you want your kid to have? Because if you're not, then your kid won't. Right? Like, if you are not having patience and you're getting frustrated when things aren't going right away, and you want things right away, right now, and having adult tantrums, then obviously your kid is going to as well. And so you can bring back, I guess, this idea of passive, but it has to come from you first. You got to fix you before you can fix your kid, because your kid's just going to replicate whatever is going on in their life.
Totally. And I almost, like, this has me thinking, maybe don't use technology as negative or positive reinforcement. Right. Maybe just use it as something that helps you with life. Because once you start establishing, oh, technology is good, or, oh, technology is bad, it's neither. It's how you utilize it, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, if a parent's like, oh, okay, my kid's acting up, here's a cell phone to play video games on, that's really terrible. But honestly, I played so much video games that I would have probably spanked myself with how much I played. But you have to also think, because I was using it as an escape from my reality, because I was immersing myself in the storyline of the game, and that was a huge part for me, because my parents weren't there to like make real life real, so I almost looked to video games as a way to establish another way of connecting with something or someone. And I don't know, I think that's why I love video games so much. But I've definitely grown out of video games. I don't play them nearly as much, but I think that just comes with growing up in time.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said with, if you just let your kids explore their interests, they're not going to stay with video games forever. They're going to get out and, especially if you are making, experiences intentional and having that time with your kids, they're going to get out and explore and see things and develop new interests that will take, I don't think that, I'm not a video gamer. I've never been a video gamer, but I also don't think it maybe is as big of a deal as we sometimes make it out to be in the grand scheme of their life. So
yeah,
it's a balance, but it's not one that you have to necessarily dictate every day. I think it's something sometimes, because I found that when you as a parent, or at least for me growing up, my parents, for example, cleaning your room, when your parents are constantly dictating to you what they want your room to look like, when you go out on your own, it typically doesn't go with you, right?
Yeah.
Then you are going to go through a time where you just go completely bonkers and everything is everywhere. It's a total disaster, hazard zone kind of place. And then you figure out how to keep things organized, because you realize, oh, no, that's not working. So a lot of it has to come from an internal desire, motivation, instead of constantly having these arguments with your kids about it. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that Man, I had this thought in my head, but it totally just escaped me real quick. Sorry, could you say what you were saying again real quick?
Internal motivation.
Oh, yeah, yeah, cleaning room and stuff. So for children, oh, this is literally who I am, for everything. And this is how I feel with bosses and authority figures and stuff as well. So big tip for parents, from a child's perspective, if you tell us what to do, tell us why. You don't want to dictate it and just say it because. Because is the worst reason you could possibly use to answer anything, because I said so. It's really irritating and it's frustrating for literally anyone. Talk to your kids like an adult. Like if you're talking to an adult and they don't understand something, you're like, okay, here, let me explain it to you. Kids are the same way. You shouldn't treat your kids like kids just because they're kids. They're human beings that know way more than you think that they do. You have to treat them like adults. So you have to explain, hey, Billy, I want you to clean your room because when you clean your room, doesn't it look so much nicer? Right? You're like, when you put your toys away, you just feel everything just feels cleaner, right? And when you go into life with when you start your day making sure that your room is nice and clean, doesn't it just start your day off right? And then everything that happens after that is just so nice. You just feel like you're ready to take on the day, right? Or something like that. I don't know. I just made that up. But I mean, it makes sense, right? If you
Yes.
explain, hey, like if you do this first thing in the morning, right? Look at how clean your room is. That feels good. Like no one likes a messy room, right? And once you finish that, you're like, hey, I completed something. So when you start your day off like that, the rest of your day could be it could be great just because you started it off that way. But then like as you go throughout the day, you have to realize, oh, okay, like this is why I'm doing this too. And you're like, oh, I just won again. So there's this guy that I follow on Instagram. His name's Charlie Jabale. His Instagram handle is just Charlie. Um, but he has this saying that I absolutely love. He says, I'm on a winning streak. And so any small thing that happens to him, so it's like, I thought that I locked my keys in my car, but actually they fell like right outside my car and I went to the grocery store, right? And then you're just like, oh my God, like that could have been really bad. I'm on a winning streak, right? It could be as big as that, or it could be as good as like, oh man, my phone was charged for this, or like my internet's working right now so I can watch this movie, like really small things. So just picking out the positive things that are happening in your life, you're very aware of what positive things are happening. And then you continue that trend throughout the day versus, oh man, like this happened to me. You focus on the negative and the same thing happens. So whether you're focused on the negative or the positive, you're focusing on something throughout the day. So why not try to focus your intention and your mindset on the things that are positive, because that's going to give you more energy than take away. Sorry,
Exactly.
that was a ramble.
But it's true. And I think, you don't have this experience yet, but even with parenting, like it can be very frustrating and triggering, especially for parents, like myself, who are still learning how to get past maybe how they were raised. And sometimes you just have to focus on the positive. Like, oh, look at the way my kid is smiling at watching this, or look how they are really learning how to learn their own boundaries physically by jumping on the couch, right? Like taking things that might give you anxiety and trying to frame it in a way that's positive is going to, over time, help you be more positive about these experiences and have less anxiety about it. So
Yeah. I mean, it's practice. Like positivity is a muscle that you have to practice.
So you have some big goals. I know we've talked a little bit before personally, and you have some big goals because of all these experiences growing up, because of even traveling to China and New Zealand and all of these things that have helped you figure out who you are. You have some big goals and dreams that you want to kind of help families, I guess, right? Help kids. And
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
let's make this our what's on the agenda next question.
Yeah, for sure. So Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll start at the beginning with how I'm going to make it happen. And this is just like, I don't know. So in, oh man, this is a lot to unpack. So I'll
Tell
start
us
with
what you're
after.
doing. What's your goal?
Okay. So my goal is to build up my company to a point that I can leave the company and then use those funds to create a nonprofit organization or a service that is national, at least in the US to start with, that will help people establish their goals for life. So, the reason why I want to do something like this is because a lot of kids grow up in the school system. We talked about this the
Yeah.
other day. Um, they grow up in the school system, right? And our school system is flawed. I'm not going to go into it, but I'm sure you've heard Mary talk about it probably at some point or will in the future. And so, going through school, you are taught how to follow directions, and that's it. Uh, you don't learn any cognition. You don't learn how to think for yourself. And so that is something that I see a lot of people my age struggle with, even into their mid to late 20s, early 30s, all the way into their 40s, is that they don't know how to goal set. They don't know how to manage their life, their money, their finances, everything. There's no class or anything that teaches people how to manage their lives. Sure, general education is good for understanding the world, but being able to survive like logically within that world that we're going into, school doesn't prepare us for that. And so what I want to do is I want to create this nonprofit organization that has at least one counselor in every school district with throughout the entire country, inner city, rural areas, everywhere. Obviously, I'll start in like bigger cities with higher populations because that makes the most impact. But I want to be able to have a counselor that has grown up within that society, train them to understand how to help other people establish goals. So kind of like a life coach, but in a way of helping people develop themselves as young adults as well. Um, I don't have everything figured out yet, but that's just the idea that I have. Just it's just boiling in my mind because I feel like that's something that America needs right now.
So if somebody were listening to this and that resonated with them, how could they help?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know how they can help right now. Like, I think the first part for this is okay. Oh, so the first,
Putting
so
on the
so
spot.
for me right now, it's about chasing my passion. So I'm selfish. I'm gonna be selfish probably for the next 5 or 6 years, or maybe a little bit longer than that. Build a company up to the point where I'm like personally satisfied. Maybe I'll never be satisfied, but enough to the point where I'm like, okay, I have enough finances to branch out and do this thing now. And then I'm gonna pour a ton of money, a ton of time into this nonprofit that I want to build or this coaching service that I'm going to build. And then I'm going to start training people in my immediate vicinity, and like establishing, I'm going to have, like, if you have experience counseling people, like that's something that I would love to learn more about. So like if anyone wants to reach out to me and talk to me about like techniques to help counsel people or techniques to help train like a mass quantity of people and spread them throughout the country. Like, I mean, those are all things that I need to learn to make this happen. But also establishing how can you have someone within a community be taught how to coach others within the same community and be able to connect because they are part of the same, I say community so many times, but community, and I think like coming from within a community is way more important, especially in inner cities that are very poor, because no one's gonna look at some guy and be like that comes into a suit where like every kid is worried about getting shot or something. Like a guy that comes in a suit in a Rolls Royce isn't gonna resonate with kids that like can barely eat food. So I think someone that came up from within the city, dude, like if anyone hears this and it sparks an idea and you started before me, just do it because I think it'll help a lot of people. So like this isn't for me to start. If I can spark this idea in someone that financially can do it and has the resources to do it now, like I hope that someone does it. Seriously. and then just, I don't know, tag me in your Facebook post or something. Be like, I got the idea from this guy, or some, whatever the social media is at that time. But I don't know. I just think it'll be really good for the world, and it's something that the world needs.
Awesome. I love that you've taken what you see as a problem and you're trying to find a way to fix it. So you're not just seeing it as a problem and then being laminating on it, right? Like you're actually trying to build up your resources and your knowledge in order to fix it. And you're not looking at it, oh, well, I don't know how to do that right now. I don't have the money to do it right now, so I guess I just will never do it. You're looking to the future and figuring out what are the steps I need to put into place to make a foundation to do that.
Exactly. Hey, Mom, I'm growing up. I'm thinking about the future now. Maybe it's like only 5 years, but I'm doing it. My parents would be so proud of me right now. But I think that something that needs to be said is, yeah, I do have these gigantic, large goals, but day-to-day stuff is really important as well. So I don't do too much of this, and I kind of need to do it more myself, to not be a hypocrite, I guess. But doing things in person is really important. But for me, I feel like that's small scale. And yeah, reaching people individually is really important. But what I want to do is like make this a countrywide thing. And I think that there needs to be more people to step up in local communities and do their own personal thing. Like I said, I should do more of this too. But like I want to hit this problem in a very, very large scale. And I know it sounds crazy to me, but I already have this vision in my head. And like, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but as long as I'm alive, I want to do this. Like build my company, build my media company, make cool content for people, and then take those resources and help people become like live to their full potential. It literally pains me physically and emotionally when I see people that just don't understand what they have and aren't working towards their full potential. I think we talked about this yesterday too.
Yeah.
And it like literally physically hurts me. 'Cause I'm like, you're amazing. You're a kind-hearted person. You can do so much more with your life. And like, you can see that there's a spark inside of them, but it's not lit yet. You know, it's not burning. And so that's what I want to ignite, because like maybe the amount of people that I'm going to influence and change lives isn't going to be, maybe it's going to be 100 in my lifetime. You know, that's a pretty big number already. But yeah, I don't know. I want it to be more than that. I just want whoever is willing to change and willing to be the best person that they can possibly be, like actually reach their full potential, or at least try to get close. Because I don't think anyone's teaching people that's the thing though. I want my business to support this organization, because I don't want this organization to profit, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like that's not the point of what I'm trying to do. So that's why I need to build this gigantic, like, I don't know, like hopefully international company to like support what I want to do. Man, I don't know, man. I just want to help the world. I don't know.
You want people to find the good in themselves, the ability in themselves. That way they can go out and do whatever it is that the world is calling for them to do. I mean, so many people, I mean, my husband and included, you know, and they grow up never thinking about possibilities, never dreaming of things that they could be or, you know, want to be. And there's so much there for them that they could feel fulfilled and they could help other people in different ways. And the world needs every single one of us to do that. But they don't have the knowledge, the resources, or the encouragement to do it. And so they just, whatever. Life is life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like another point in that is that like, oh man, it's so hot in my room. Sorry, I'm like forgetting stuff. Can you say what you just said over again one more time? Summarize.
Basically, the world needs us to fill our potential.
And I totally forgot where I was going with this. I had something really good. I got this new light bulb and it's like so hot. Like it's crazy hot. But I think that I don't know. So our whole lives we're told no, right?
Mm-hmm.
So hey, like, okay, when you're really young, your parents are like, oh, you want to be an astronaut? Cool, you should do it, you know? And then when you're actually of age and you start understanding, what do they say? Hey, Johnny, like maybe you should set more realistic goals. Or hey, Johnny, like maybe being an astronaut isn't that great of a plan. Maybe you should think about, being a doctor or a PA. But like,
Have
so
a
what
safety
if,
net. The safety net.
right? And honestly, I think like when people do their best is when their back is against the wall because they have no other option but to succeed. So you don't think of, oh, what can I do besides this, So I think instead of, okay, this is another tip for parents. I mean, all my stuff, please take it with a grain of salt. This is for me personally. Please do your own research and think it over. Don't just listen to anyone, as a matter of fact, without thinking about it for yourself. Is that rather than saying like no for situations or a negative way of going about it, say something like, figure it out. So when something happens, you're like, oh, I want to get this new game system and I can't afford it. And they're like, Mom, can you buy it for me? Just be like, figure it out. If you want it, just get it yourself. How are you going to do that? And then guess what? Some of the most amazing entrepreneurs are built that way because their parents say, I don't know. I'm not going to get it for you. You figure it out. And then they have to think, okay, so what am I going to do now? So a child's most important gift in life is thought, right? So I'm not talking about kids that have like mental disabilities. Okay. I'm talking about like if a child has normal cognition,
Neurotypical,
like,
yeah.
yeah. If they can think normally and they're normal, then they help facilitate them to think about certain things, right? Because the more they think, the more that they'll be like, the more they'll be able to problem solve in the future. That's something that I've realized is that whenever I'm thinking, I can always figure out things, and I'm not thinking about negatives, right? So if I'm figuring out how to solve a problem, I'm not thinking like, oh, this is like the worst time of my life. I'm having such a bad time. So like, my friend, his car broke down. He got a flat tire, and if you're in a hurry to something, you could just be like really angry and frustrated and upset. But like those emotions aren't beneficial in any way. The only thing that's beneficial is sitting down, taking a breath, and being like, okay, do I have a spare? Yes. Okay, cool. Jack your car up, put the spare on, go to what you're going to do, and then just apologize for being late or whatever, Nothing in the world is as urgent as people make it out to be, like 99.9% of the time, right? If you just got shot and you're bleeding, like maybe that's a different thing, but
Maybe not.
yeah, but
You have,
everything can, yeah, you
there
have time.
are, I think you're on the right direction. Definitely. Like, you don't have to just say no. For one, like you said before, explain maybe. Like, oh, well, that's not in our budget. And then explain how a budget, maybe not at that moment, but later you can involve your child in making a budget. And you involve them in how we save for things that we want and how we figure out how to earn money when we want something, outside of that budget. It's not
Yeah,
just saying, hey, figure it out, whatever. It's taking the time to be like, right now I'm not going to be able to buy that. It's not
yeah.
within our budget, but I have faith in you that you can definitely make a plan to earn some money to get that for yourself.
100%. And I think it's taking children through those practical skills. Like maybe they won't realize how important it is right now, but a lot of parents are feeding their kids like what they don't want all the time. So why not feed them something that would be beneficial? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's how I feel about it. But there's these books that I'm actually going to be buying for my friend's kid for the parents to read to them. And so one of the people that I love following the most, he's a very successful entrepreneur. He wrote multiple children's books about how to be successful in life. And I think starting with kids at a very young age and reading to them you need to work hard to be successful. You need to work hard to be good at what you do, what you want to be good at, right? Sitting around being lazy isn't going to produce anything.
Or waiting for the fairy godmother to give it to you.
Oh my gosh, rainbows, unicorns, and butterflies. Yeah, that's not how life actually is. And then, yeah, and if that's what parents teach their kids, they go into the real world, then they get stomped on by life. And then, like, what's going to happen then? They're going to get really depressed. Depression is huge in our society right now. That could be a potential reason why. When kids go a little psychotic because they can't handle what life is throwing at them because their parents never taught them how to manage frustration and anger and downfalls and failures. You know, those are all a part of life, but parents are hiding their kids from that sort of thing. And like the guy's name is Andy Frisella, and his books are it's Charlie's Bulldog. So Otis and Charlie, they play to win. There's like a whole bunch of books. He has like 3 or 4 books, I think. But I would say if you want your kid to succeed, these are a really good place to start. I'm actually going to buy them for my best friend's kids. So I don't know. Take it as a grain of salt. Check it out for yourself. Probably go to a bookstore and see it. But the way I know this person, I listen to this guy's podcast literally every single day. And he has over 300 something episodes. And I like everything he says, 85% of what he says is good, especially when it comes to changing our society. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
All right. Well, we'll put those links to the podcast and to those books in the show notes for anybody that is interested for their own selves or kids, depending on which happen either one day.
Oh, he's very, very. If you're a PG, he curses more than anyone I know. So it's called the MFCEO Project. You can probably guess what MF stands for. So just like be ready that he's very raunchy, but he's very real, which is what I love about it. He's real with where American society is specifically. So, yeah.
All right. And then just the last couple of questions, because you've actually answered a lot of these throughout the podcast already. But well, I guess you've already answered that too. So where can people connect or find out more about you? If they're really interested. That's we've covered everything else.
Yeah, I'm a mind reader, I guess. So for my company, the media company that I have, it's Brian Zhou Multimedia. It's BrianZhou, and then multimedia. Same with my website, Instagram, Facebook. And if you want to find my podcast, so essentially what my podcast is exposing people, kind of like what you're doing. Actually, it's really similar in that sense. Is I have people come on, we conversate about their lives, and I have people on from all sorts of different walks of life. I've had a trans friend come on, gay friends come on, people that are religious in different religions, people from the inner city that grew up around gangs. So what I do is I interview them, have them share their life stories, and ask them how those events impacted their lives to hopefully bring exposure and understanding to why they think the way that they do, which is a huge step in the right direction when it comes to understanding other people. And I think that a lot of where hate and frustration and fear come from is that people don't understand each other. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I want to build, is that I'm not Christian, but I had a guy on that was Christian. And if you know me, you could probably tell that I was like, oh, here we go with the Christian talk again, you know? And I think I got a little like, I wasn't like heated, or I think I got a little excited is what I would say. But yeah, so I'm not going to say that I agree with everything. I'm not saying that you should agree with everything, but what I'm putting out there is objective points of views on why people think that the way they do. So that's called The Brian Zhou Show. The Brian, Brian, last name Zhou, Show, Brian Zhou Show. You can find that on all of the platforms. So iTunes, Spotify, I don't know, Stitcher,
wherever
Google, whatever. Yeah, anywhere you want to find a podcast, my podcast will be there. And also, if you want to just shoot me a message on Twitter, it's The Brian Zhou Show. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining, being like very vulnerable and real, and and just showing parents like what a kid has felt needed to be changed so that they can maybe take those steps and not even necessarily take those exact steps, but to objectively look at their own family life and figure out what maybe they're not seeing so that they can make those course corrections now before it's too late. Not that it's ever too late, but before it goes down the rabbit hole they don't want to go down.
Yeah, I would say like mid-20s, 20s, like late 20s is getting there for sure. But yeah, take some notes, go back, listen to it again. I think I gave out a lot of really good perspective from the child's point of view, and hopefully that gives you some understanding of how we feel, mom and dad. So yeah, I really do hope that this helps some people. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, and look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this podcast. If you enjoyed this, please make sure you subscribe and leave a rating and review, especially in iTunes. That would really help. And remember, we have a Facebook group for moms of littles at facebook.com/groups/This Indulgent Life, where you, for right now, can get that free 5-day Calmer, More Joyful You challenge, as well as all of the lives that I do weekly, as well as all of the tips and tricks that I give and post weekly, and the fun that we have. So come and join us. I really want it to be a place of encouragement, of learning, and honestly, a place to kind of de-stress. So I cannot wait to see you there. And remember, you can find all of the show notes at thisindulgentlife.com/24. Until next week, I hope you have an inspired week. And remember to take some time for yourself.